The teacher who created a superstar, Julio's forgotten voice coach. Behind every great artist stands a teacher whose influence extends far beyond technique into the realm of artistic soul-shaping. For Julio Iglesias, the world's best-selling male recording artist, that teacher was Carmen Mercedes Vázquez, a classically trained voice instructor whose revolutionary methods and uncompromising standards transformed a talented but unrefined young man into a global phenomenon. For over 50 years, Carmen's contributions remained largely unknown outside professional music circles. She never sought publicity, never claimed credit for her students' success, and died in 1995, having never given a single interview about her most famous pupil. This investigation uncovers the forgotten story of the woman who created not just Julio's voice, but the artistic foundation that would sustain a career spanning 6 decades and selling over 1 billion records worldwide. Elena Morales, current director of vocal studies at Madrid's Real Conservatorio Superior de Música, begins by explaining Carmen Vázquez's unique qualifications for developing international talent. Carmen was extraordinary, a classically trained soprano who had studied in Milan and Vienna before returning to Spain in 1955. Dr. Morales explains, reviewing Carmen's academic credentials. She brought European vocal techniques that were revolutionary for Spanish music education at the time. Carmen's own performing career had been cut short by the restrictive cultural policies of Franco Spain, which limited opportunities for female classical performers. She channeled her frustrated artistic ambitions into teaching, notes music historian Dr. Rafael Sanchez. Her students became the vehicles through which she could influence Spanish musical culture. Former conservatory registrar Miguel Torres recalls Carmen's reputation among faculty. She was known for taking promising but technically flawed students and completely rebuilding their vocal approach from the ground up. Most teachers work with what students bring them. Carmen created entirely new vocal identities. Her teaching philosophy combined classical European technique with an understanding of popular music's emotional demands, a combination that was unusual in 1960s Spain, where classical and popular music were considered incompatible. Carmen believed that proper technique enhanced rather than restricted emotional expression, explains Dr. Patricia Jimenez, a vocal pedagogy specialist who studied Carmen's methods. She taught students to use classical breath control and voice placement to achieve greater emotional impact in popular music. When 19-year-old Julio Iglesias arrived at Carmen's studio in September 1962, he presented an unusual challenge. Recently recovered from the car accident that ended his football career, he had natural musical instincts but virtually no formal training. Julio was what we call a natural singer, recalls Dr. Antonio Garcia, who was studying at the conservatory during Julio's early lessons. He could carry a tune and had innate rhythm, but his technique was completely untrained. His breathing was shallow, his voice placement was inconsistent, and he had no understanding of vocal protection. Carmen's initial assessment, preserved in her teaching notes and made available by her estate, was both encouraging and brutally honest. Student shows exceptional musicality and natural charisma. Voice quality is pleasant, but technically underdeveloped. Breathing insufficient for professional demands. Requires complete technical reconstruction. Former student Isabella Moreno, who studied with Carmen during the same period, witnessed Julio's early lessons. Carmen told him immediately that he would need to forget everything he thought he knew about singing and start completely over. For someone who already had some success performing in local venues, that was a difficult message to accept. But Julio's recent accident had left him newly humble and determined to succeed in music, since sports were no longer an option. The accident had made him very focused, notes Dr. Garcia. He wasn't just looking for hobby instruction, he needed to build a professional career, and he understood that meant serious technical development. Carmen's teaching approach differed dramatically from conventional Spanish voice instruction of the period. Lucia Fernandez, who has written extensively about Spanish vocal pedagogy, explains the innovations Carmen brought to popular music training. Traditional Spanish voice teaching in the 1960s focused primarily on power and projection, the ability to sing loudly and clearly. Carmen introduced concepts from Italian bel canto that emphasized breath control, vocal efficiency, and emotional nuance. Carmen's lesson plans, preserved in the conservatory archives, reveal a systematic approach to rebuilding Julio's vocal technique from the foundation up. Month 1 to 3. Breath Control Foundation. Former student Ana Belén describes the rigorous breathing exercises. Carmen made Julio spend entire lessons just breathing, no singing, just learning to control his diaphragm and expand his lung capacity. She said, "You can't build a voice on a weak foundation." Month 4 through 6. Voice Placement and Resonance. She taught him where to place his voice in his body for different emotional effects, recalls Dr. Garcia. Higher placement for romantic tenderness, chest voice for intimate warmth. She made him understand that technique serves emotional expression, not the other way around. Months 7 through 12. Language and diction integration. Carmen's background in multiple European languages proved crucial for Julio's international aspirations. She worked with him on Spanish, Italian, and French diction, teaching him how to maintain vocal consistency while adapting to different linguistic demands, notes Dr. Jimenez. Beyond technical instruction, Carmen provided crucial psychological coaching that shaped Julio's artistic identity. Carmen Ruiz, a music psychologist who has studied performer development, explains the importance of this aspect of training. Carmen understood that vocal technique is inseparable from psychological confidence. She wasn't just teaching Julio how to sing, she was teaching him how to believe in himself as an artist worthy of international recognition. Contemporary witness accounts describe Carmen's approach to building Julio's confidence. She was demanding but never discouraging, recalls former student Roberto Silva. She would point out technical flaws while simultaneously reinforcing his natural strengths and unique qualities. Carmen's teaching notes include psychological observations alongside technical assessments. Student tends towards self-doubt despite natural charisma. Must build confidence in his unique vocal quality rather than trying to imitate established singers. His strength lies in intimate emotional communication, not dramatic power. Vocal coach Maria Esperanza, who learned Carmen's methods as a young teacher, explains the psychological foundation of the training. Carmen taught students to understand their individual vocal gifts and build technique around those gifts, rather than trying to force their voices into predetermined molds. Carmen's influence extended beyond technical training to fundamental questions of artistic integrity and commercial success. Dr. Sanchez explains how her classical background informed her approach to popular music. Carmen believed that proper artistic training would enhance rather than compromise commercial appeal. She taught Julio that technical excellence and emotional authenticity were not contradictory but complementary. Her philosophy, according to former students, emphasized several key principles. Emotional honesty. She insisted that technique serve emotional expression, never overwhelm it, recalls Dr. Garcia. She taught Julio to use his technical skills to communicate more effectively, not to show off his vocal abilities. Cultural sophistication. Carmen exposed Julio to Italian opera, French chanson, and German lieder to broaden his artistic palette, notes Dr. Morales. She wanted him to understand that popular music could be artistically sophisticated without losing mass appeal. Professional discipline. She taught him that maintaining vocal health and consistency was essential for a long career, explains vocal therapist Dr. Luis Martin. The breathing and warm-up routines she established became lifelong habits that protected his voice through decades of heavy touring. According to multiple witnesses, the turning point in Julio's training came in his 8th month of study, during a lesson where everything finally clicked. Dr. Garcia, who was present in the hallway, remembers hearing the difference. Suddenly, the voice coming from Carmen's studio was completely different. It had the same basic quality as Julio's natural voice, but with a richness and control that was entirely new. Carmen had succeeded in enhancing his natural gifts through technical training. Carmen's notes from that day are revealing. Student has achieved integration of breath control with natural voice placement. Technical foundation now solid enough to support emotional expression without strain. Ready to begin repertoire development and performance preparation. Former student Ana Belén witnessed Julio's reaction. He was amazed by his own sound. For the first time, he could hear how his voice would sound with professional training. It was a revelation that changed his entire approach to music. The breakthrough represented more than technical progress. It marked Julio's transformation from talented amateur to potential professional. After that lesson, Julio's confidence was completely different, recalls Dr. Garcia. He began carrying himself like someone who belonged on professional stages. Once Julio's technical foundation was established, Carmen began the crucial process of helping him develop an appropriate repertoire that showcased his unique vocal qualities. Dr. Fernandez explains the sophisticated process Carmen used. She analyzed his voice scientifically, vocal range, timbre, emotional expressiveness, then selected songs that highlighted his strengths while avoiding his limitations. It was like a master craftsman selecting the perfect materials for a precision instrument. Carmen's approach to song selection was revolutionary for its time. Rather than choosing standard conservatory pieces, she selected romantic ballads from various traditions, Spanish, Italian, French, and Latin American, that would prepare Julio for international performance. She understood that Julio's voice was naturally suited for intimate, romantic expression, explains vocal coach Teresa Lopez, who studied Carmen's repertoire choices. She built his early repertoire around songs that required emotional nuance rather than vocal power. The training included crucial work on emotional interpretation. Carmen taught him to understand the emotional content of songs in multiple languages, notes Dr. Jimenez. She wanted him to communicate genuine feeling, not just competent technique. Carmen's training extended beyond private lessons to include performance coaching that prepared Julio for professional appearances. Concert promoter Eduardo Martinez, who worked with Julio during his early career, credits Carmen with developing his stage presence. When Julio first started performing professionally, his stage manner was completely professional, confident but not arrogant, intimate but not informal. That level of sophistication doesn't happen naturally. Carmen had clearly prepared him for public performance. Carmen's performance training included several crucial elements. Strong stage movement. She taught him how to move naturally while singing, how to use gestures that enhanced rather than distracted from his vocal performance, recalls former student Roberto Silva. Audience connection. Carmen emphasized that singing was communication, not just sound production. She taught Julio to think of each song as a conversation with the audience, explains Dr. Ruiz. Professional stamina. She prepared him for the physical demands of regular performance, how to maintain vocal quality over long concerts, how to protect his voice during touring, notes vocal therapist Dr. Ruiz. Martín. Perhaps Carmen's most prescient contribution was preparing Julio for international success at a time when few Spanish artists achieved global recognition. Her European training and multilingual abilities proved crucial for his later career. Carmen understood that Spanish artists needed to master multiple musical traditions to succeed internationally, explains Dr. Sanchez. She gave Julio the technical tools to adapt his natural Spanish warmth to different cultural contexts. Her language coaching proved particularly important. Linguistics professor Dr. Ana Rodriguez explains. Carmen taught Julio not just pronunciation, but the emotional inflection patterns of different languages. When he later recorded in French or Italian, he could convey authentic emotional meaning, not just accurate pronunciation. The foundation Carmen provided enabled Julio's later collaborations with international musicians. His ability to work with artists from different musical traditions stemmed from the broad artistic education Carmen provided, notes music producer Carlos Vega, who worked on several of Julio's international recordings. While Carmen rarely discussed her famous student publicly, her private correspondence with fellow teachers provides insights into her perspective on Julio's development. Letters preserved in the conservatory archives reveal her pride and continued concern for his artistic growth. In a 1975 letter to former colleague Prof. Isabella Garcia, Carmen wrote, "Julio has achieved the international recognition we hoped for, but I sometimes worry about the commercial pressures affecting his artistic choices. The foundation is solid, but he must remember that technique serves art, not commerce." Her continued interest in his career reflected the deep investment she had made in his development. Carmen followed Julio's career closely throughout her life, recalls Dr. Morales. She was proud of his success, but always evaluated it from an artistic perspective. Former students remember Carmen's balanced assessment of Julio's achievements. She celebrated his commercial success, but was most pleased when she heard recordings where his technical training enhanced his emotional expression, notes Ana Belén. Music industry professionals who worked with Julio throughout his career can identify Carmen's influence in his consistent vocal quality and professional approach. Producer Quincy Jones, who worked on several international projects with Julio, praised his technical reliability. Julio was a pleasure to work with because he came to every session completely prepared. His voice was always in good condition, he understood his capabilities perfectly, and he could deliver consistent quality take after take. That level of professionalism indicates superb early training. Audio engineer Bruce Swedian, who recorded several of Julio's albums, noted his unusual technical consistency. Over decades of recording, Julio's voice showed remarkably little deterioration. His breath control and voice placement remained consistent from his early recordings to his later work. That kind of vocal longevity requires exceptional foundational training. Vocal coach to international stars Robert Lunte explains why Carmen's training was so effective. She gave Julio classical technique adapted for popular music, the best of both worlds. He could perform with the emotional directness that popular music requires, while maintaining the vocal health and consistency that classical training provides. Though Carmen never sought recognition for her role in Julio's success, her teaching methods influenced a generation of Spanish voice instructors. Fernandez documents how Carmen's integration of classical technique with popular music became standard practice. Carmen proved that classical vocal training enhanced, rather than restricted, popular music performance. Her methods are now considered standard practice for training commercial singers who want long, healthy careers. Several prominent Spanish singers from Julio's generation received training based on Carmen's methods. Her influence extended far beyond Julio, notes Dr. Morales. Many successful Spanish recording artists of the 1970s and 1980s were trained by teachers who had learned Carmen's integration techniques. Current vocal instructors still reference Carmen's work. Her exercise progressions and breathing techniques are included in most contemporary popular music vocal training programs, explains vocal coach Sandra Lopez. She created a bridge between classical and popular vocal training that didn't exist before. Modern voice science has validated many of Carmen's intuitive teaching methods. Dr. Johan Sundberg, a leading voice researcher, explains how contemporary understanding supports Carmen's approach. Her emphasis on breath control and voice placement aligns perfectly with current scientific understanding of optimal vocal function. She was using empirical methods to achieve what we now understand as acoustically and physiologically optimal vocal production. Research by voice scientist Dr. Ingo Titzi demonstrates the effectiveness of the breathing techniques Carmen taught. The diaphragmatic breathing and breath support exercises she used are now scientifically proven to reduce vocal strain and enhance vocal endurance, exactly what a professional singer needs for a long career. Maria Belao, who has studied vocal longevity in professional singers, notes, singers trained with classical foundational techniques, like those Carmen taught, show significantly less vocal deterioration over time compared to purely self-taught performers. Despite their professional relationship, Carmen and Julio maintained personal connection throughout his career. Former conservatory colleagues described their continued correspondence and occasional meetings when Julio performed in Madrid. Carmen was genuinely fond of Julio as a person, not just proud of him as a successful student, recalls Dr. Garcia. She appreciated his loyalty to his early teachers and his continued respect for serious musical training. Julio's dedication of his 1978 album Emociones to Carmen, quien me enseñó a cantar desde el corazón, Carmen, who taught me to sing from the heart, was the only public acknowledgement he made of her influence during her lifetime. Carmen was deeply moved by the dedication, remembers Ana Belén. She felt it demonstrated that Julio understood her teaching had been about more than technique. It had been about artistic integrity and emotional honesty. When Carmen Vázquez died in 1995, few outside professional music circles understood the extent of her influence on popular music. Music journalist Juan Carlos Calderón, one of the few to write about her contributions, explained why her role remained largely unknown. Carmen belonged to a generation of teachers who believed their job was to develop talent, not claim credit for it. She was more interested in artistic results than public recognition. Her death prompted retrospective appreciation from music professionals who understood her importance. With Carmen's passing, the Spanish music world lost one of its most influential figures, wrote composer Augusto Alguero in a tribute article. Today, music education programs increasingly recognize the importance of teachers like Carmen, who bridge classical and popular traditions. She represents the kind of comprehensive musical education that creates lasting artistic careers, notes Dr. Morales. Carmen Mercedes Vázquez never received public recognition for creating one of the world's most successful recording artists. She never appeared on television, never gave interviews, and never claimed credit for Julio Iglesias' achievements. But her true monument exists in every song Julio has sung over 6 decades, in the vocal consistency that has allowed him to perform into his 80s, and in the artistic foundation that transformed natural talent into enduring artistry. Carmen's legacy lives in Julio's voice, reflects Dr. Morales. Every time he sings, we hear the result of her patient, skilled, and devoted teaching. She created not just a successful performer, but a vocal instrument capable of touching hearts across every cultural and linguistic boundary. The teacher who asked for no recognition ultimately achieved the greatest recognition possible. Her work continues to bring beauty and joy to millions of listeners worldwide, proving that the most important influences often remain invisible, while their effects endure forever. In the end, Carmen Vázquez accomplished what every great teacher hopes to achieve. She made herself unnecessary by giving her student the tools to succeed independently, while remaining forever essential through the foundation she provided. The voice that has sold over 1 billion records worldwide exists because a dedicated teacher in Madrid understood that true artistry requires both natural talent and acquired skill, both emotional honesty and technical excellence, both commercial appeal and artistic integrity. Carmen's greatest achievement was proving that these seemingly contradictory elements could be perfectly integrated in a single voice, a voice that continues to sing her legacy to the world, one beautiful song at a time.